Perfectionism can be defined as the need to be perfect, to appear perfect, or to believe that it is possible to achieve perfection. The perfectionist might feel the need to be perfect. They set unrealistically high standards for themselves, or to appear perfect because they want to comply with the actual or perceived standards that society imposes. In this sense, there are three types of perfectionism. Self-oriented perfectionism, when we require perfectionism from ourselves. Socially prescribed perfectionism, when we require our own perfectionism because it is our surrounding society that expects it from us. And other-oriented perfectionism, which is when we expect perfectionism from others. Many of us have experienced perfectionism, maybe only to a certain degree or in a certain area of our lives, or from time to time, or even all the time. Perfectionism is a personality trait that for some people, or sometimes, it is positive or healthy. And for other people, or some other times, it is rather negative or unhealthy. Domains of perfectionism are multiple: work or school, intimate relationships and friendships, physical appearance, the surrounding environment, physical activity, health and hygiene, and the way we speak and write. I want to talk about perfectionism because a lot of us have this trait, for better or for worse. I know I struggle with it. There have been times in my life when I have been a perfectionist in a healthy way, but there have been other times when my perfectionism was mostly negative. When is perfectionism negative and when is it positive? People who are perfectionists at work or in school may procrastinate in doing a task that they don't feel confident in, or may take longer than others to finish a task. This happens because perfectionists want to complete a task perfectly. Or when they do complete a task, but they realize that they have made mistakes, they feel like a failure. This is the case of unhealthy perfectionism. On the other hand, healthy perfectionism has people dedicating an appropriate amount of their time to a task and either feel satisfied with the good results of their work or not beat themselves up when they have made mistakes. Perfectionists might spend an excessive amount of their time worrying about what to wear or about their makeup. Healthy perfectionists might spend some time thinking about what to wear or how to do their makeup, but most of their time they dedicate it to tasks that have higher priorities. People who are perfectionists in the way they speak or write might actually get worse at it, because they might avoid speaking or writing altogether for fear of making mistakes. While people who are on the healthy side of perfectionism focus on their continuous improvement, which only occurs if they keep trying. Research has shown that individuals that score high on perfectionism scales under certain circumstances, they have better outcomes. This was the case for example, people who were fighting over disease. Perfectionistic individuals actually did better than those who scored low on perfectionism. And the reason for that is that they had higher standards for themselves. They had to be very rigorous with their medication. They had to eat foods that were good for them, exercise. Some studies have suggested that the role of perfectionism on health might depend on who is imposing the high standards. They found out that socially prescribed perfectionism was associated with poorer health, while self-oriented perfectionism was associated with better health. Healthy perfectionism is I work hard to achieve success. Unhealthy perfectionism is I work hard, but unless everything is perfect, then nothing is worthwhile. Unhealthy perfectionists can get their desired results, but they still feel unsatisfied. Unhealthy perfectionism has been shown to be detrimental to the people that have it. It can lead to an all or nothing thinking, where the person thinks that they are either a success or a failure, a tendency to avoid challenges, however simple they may be, toxic comparisons with others, all leading to feelings of unworthiness, low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and many other negative outcomes. What we want is to not get rid of perfectionism, but rather replace unhealthy perfectionism with healthy perfectionism. That means we want to make perfectionism work for us and not against us. We should have high standards for ourselves, but we have to make sure that they are realistic and attainable. The good news is, habits, attitudes, and behavior can all be changed. It is possible to replace our unhealthy habits, attitudes, and behavior about our standards with healthier ones. Some people might resist this change, and more often than not, the reason is they are invested in the identity of being a perfectionist because of the connotations of the word perfect. If you are still caught up in this identity, I ask you to stop for a second. Think back to instances where your perfectionistic trait has come to show. Has it worked for you or against you? Think of specific situations. I ask you to do this because people who are invested in this perfectionist identity are generally people that have a relatively high score of unhealthy perfectionism. Again, I am in no way saying that we should get rid of perfectionism altogether. We just need to change our attitudes and behavior about it. The question that remains is how? Number 1, revisit your standards. Ask yourself, what standards have you set for yourself at your job? Do you have a hard time starting a task that you find difficult? Or do you start it with curiosity and the thought that working on a new task will make you better? We should set standards in our lives, but first we have to choose these standards consciously, and we should cautiously assess whether they are realistic. When we're about to start a new job, it is realistic to set a goal that we will start delivering after some time of adapting and learning. What is not realistic is for that goal to be, I will shine from the very first day, because if that is the goal, what will happen if we do not shine on the first day, which is very likely the case, is we will feel like we've already failed. During one of my first important internships that I have done in my academic life, I struggled a lot with perfectionism. When I started, I had a low self-esteem because I had realized that I didn't know much. But up to that point, I had always been an A student, so feeling that way made me isolate myself because I couldn't have anyone know that I wasn't perfect. Because of all the knowledge that I was missing and the need to not to appear imperfect, I was having issues almost all the time at doing my job. And I couldn't ask anyone because that would mean that I had to admit that I wasn't even close to being perfect. At the time, I had no idea what was going on. I wasn't learning much. I started shying away from communicating with my own supervisor. I started isolating myself from my friends. And as a result, my self-esteem took a massive dive. After the internship was over, I realized that I had been too hard on myself for no reason. Nobody expected miracles from me. My need to appear perfect, which of course didn't happen either, made me first become better at being hard on myself and isolating myself from others, and second, and most important, waste the time I could have used to learn what I didn't know and more. At that point, I started setting my goals straight. My goal now was to use experiences to learn, which meant I would even ask questions whose response was obvious or I should have already known, but as long as I didn't know it or didn't understand it, it was okay for me to ask it. I gave myself the green light to ask and question things because my standard now was to become better. Go through the standards that you have set in different areas of your life and assess your standards and goals. And if you realize that the ones that you have set are not attainable or are just too much, relax them a little or replace them altogether with attainable ones. This is the first step into turning our unhealthy perfectionism into a healthy or just a healthier one to begin with. Number 2, planning. Once you have set realistic standards for yourself, you can easily plan your time for the things that you have to do. At work, create a checklist of tasks and subtasks to each task that you have to do for the day. Realistically, considering that you have 7 to 8 hours in the working day to do several tasks, decide to spend, say, 2 hours on a first draft that your boss asked of you. Having a list of several subtasks to do for one particular task will remove the need that you would otherwise have to work on that task endlessly. An unhealthy perfectionist will work on a task, will maybe even finish it, but they are still going to keep working on it, either adding small details or changing things because they want to make it look perfect. But with a checklist of subtasks, which could include using a particular format for the document or spell checking, now you can tick off that subtask once you've done it and you don't have to go back to it. Number 3, focus on the big picture. Perfectionists are known for their attention to detail. It is what takes so much time and effort because they want things to reach perfection. Recognize the time and effort that it takes you to finish one task. Once you have finished, well, your version of finishing, ask yourself, was the time and effort that you spent on all the details that made that task worth it? If it was, because this is the absolute one and only thing where you can prove yourself, then okay. But more often than not, it is not worth it. Each of the videos that I share here with you requires time and effort for researching the topic I am going to talk about, for writing down what I want to say, and then for editing the video. Each of these tasks takes time and effort, but because I have to do other things too, I have to prioritize my subtasks so that I give the most time and effort to what I deem to be the most important. I could find a better spot to record my videos, or I don't know, I could put on more makeup, or for me, coming up with content that is good and will serve you is more important than anything else. So I focus on that. Decide to lose a bit of focus on small details and gain more on what is most important. You could spend an entire day on preparing a presentation, but at the end, what will matter most is the content. There is a term used in economics, the point of diminishing returns, which is the point after the optimal level of capacity in a production process, where every additional unit of production results in a smaller increase in output. In other words, once you have finished preparing a good presentation, putting in more work in the little details will not change the presentation by much. In fact, you could spend a lot of time for a very small improvement in the presentation. Number 4, stop and reflect on your perfectionism. Changing our unhealthy perfectionism to a healthy one might not be so easy. It can be a process, so if you've decided to start this process, make it a point to stop every once in a while, for example, every once a week, and review. Think about particular instances, if there were any, where you avoided doing something at work because you didn't want to show that you're not perfect. Did you spend too much time in little things, which at the end of the week did not make much difference? Did you starve yourself because you want to look perfect physically? Or did you celebrate completing a task just for the sake of it being completed? Did you work out hard but still gave yourself a break by eating your favorite dessert? By doing this, you evaluate consciously the things that helped you and those that didn't. And doing this regularly, you get to correct those that you know didn't serve you and think of more things to do that do serve you. Additionally, you get very good at recognizing quickly things that in the future will work for you and things that will not. Number 5, ask people close to you for help. If you're in the way of improving your perfectionism, you might find it helpful to ask your sibling or a close friend to keep track of your perfectionistic behavior. We are not so good at recognizing when something is not doing us any favors. Oftentimes, if not always, it is the other person that recognizes it first. So ask someone who you trust to be open into talking to you whenever you are showing a dose of unhealthy perfectionism. Number 6, challenge yourself. Once you start getting into the process of amending the things that do not serve you, set up challenges for yourself. If it is still difficult for you to engage in things you know nothing about, decide to do so next time the opportunity presents itself. Many of us could, for example, shy away from a hobby that we have had for a long time because of the fear of being a beginner. Now is the time that you take action and start going to a class that will teach you that. Find whatever you have been afraid to do, or that you've been wanting to do, or that you know will make you better, and be willing to show your imperfection. At the end of the day, keep in mind, nobody knows everything. We are all imperfect. Number 7, practice compassion. It has been shown that one of the most robust protections against anxiety and depression is compassion toward ourselves. It is not rare that unhealthy perfectionism leads to anxiety and depression. Self-compassion is being our own best friend. If we are having a hard time starting to replace our unhealthy attitudes with healthy ones, it's okay. We shouldn't beat ourselves up. Instead, we should say, I tried today, but it didn't work because of this or that. I will try again tomorrow. And then we try again the next day. If we have started the process, but one day we fall back into our old habits, that's okay too. The path to improvement doesn't have to be straight. We can do better next time. On the other hand, we should be more compassionate toward others as well. Perfectionists that expect others to be perfect are generally very hard on everyone that they deem to not be perfect. Needless to say, it's not good for the other person, but it is not good for us either. Instead, realize that nobody is perfect. It is okay to make mistakes, to show an imperfect part of ourselves. It makes other people more humble when we show them that we embrace their imperfectionism. And in return, us showing compassion to our imperfect peers makes us more humble and more deserving of their compassion. This list is made up of 7 things that you can do to improve your perfectionism. It can be taken as a step-by-step list, but all 7 items can also stand alone. So use it the way you see fit, the way it serves you. And I will see you guys next week.